Bedtime myths and mysteries, where legends never sleep.
Welcome back to Bedtime Myths and Mysteries, where we explore the stories that shaped our world, the traditions we carry without question, and the ancient echoes that still resonate in our modern lives. Tonight, as we settle into the comfort of winter's embrace, we're going to unravel a question that might seem simple on the surface, but like so many traditions, holds layers of meaning that stretch back through centuries of human experience. Why do we sing Christmas carols? Not just how they came to be, but why this particular tradition, this act of communal singing during the darkest time of the year, has persisted across cultures, across religions, across the vast changes that have transformed nearly every other aspect of how we celebrate this season. Let's begin not with Christmas, but with something older, something that exists in the human experience long before any particular holiday claimed it. We are creatures who sing. Anthropologists have found evidence of music making that dates back at least 40,000 years, perhaps longer. Before we had written language, before we built cities or planted crops in organized rows, we sang. We created rhythm with our hands and our feet, and we raised our voices together in patterns that transcended simple communication. Song, it seems, is woven into the very fabric of what it means to be human. But why? What purpose does singing serve that speaking cannot? The answer lies partly in the nature of group singing itself. When humans sing together, something remarkable happens in our bodies and our brains. Our heartbeats begin to synchronize. Our breathing falls into rhythm with one another. The act of singing in unison or harmony creates a physiological bond between people, a literal connection that makes us feel part of something larger than ourselves. In ancient times, this would have been crucial for survival. Groups that could coordinate, that felt bonded to one another, were more likely to work together effectively, to share resources, to protect one another from threats. Singing together was a form of social glue, and it still is. Now consider the winter solstice, that moment when the earth tilts furthest from the sun and darkness reaches its peak. For our ancestors living in northern climates, this was a time of genuine danger. Food was scarce. The cold could kill. The sun, that life-giving force, seemed to be abandoning them, each day growing shorter than the last. Many cultures developed solstice celebrations specifically to mark this turning point, to acknowledge the darkness, and to express hope, even faith, that the light would return. The Romans celebrated Saturnalia, a festival of feasting and role reversal, and yes, singing. The Norse had Yule, marked by bonfires and songs that were meant to chase away the darkness and welcome back the sun. These weren't frivolous celebrations. They were psychological survival mechanisms, ways of maintaining hope and community cohesion when the world seemed most hostile. When Christianity spread across Europe, it encountered these deep-rooted winter celebrations and did what successful religions often do. It absorbed them, transformed them, gave them new meaning while preserving their essential emotional function. The birth of Christ was assigned to December 25th, placing it directly in the heart of the winter solstice period. Suddenly, the return of the light had a new narrative, a new theological framework. But the fundamental human need it addressed remained the same. We needed something to celebrate when everything felt dark. We needed reasons to gather together, to feast, to sing, to remember that we were not alone in the cold. The earliest Christmas carols, as we would recognize them, began to appear in Europe around the 13th century. But these weren't the carols we know today. The word carol originally referred to a circle dance accompanied by singing, something communal and participatory rather than a performance to be observed. These early carols were in the vernacular languages, not Latin, which meant ordinary people could understand and join in. This was significant. For centuries, religious music had been the domain of trained clergy, sung in Latin in churches, something impressive and beautiful, but fundamentally separate from the daily lives of common people. Carols changed that. They brought sacred music into the streets, into homes, into the lived experience of ordinary believers. One of the reasons carols spread so effectively is that they told stories, not abstract theological arguments, but narratives people could picture and emotionally connect with. A young woman giving birth in a stable, shepherds visited by angels, wise men following a star across a desert. These weren't just religious teachings, they were human dramas, filled with wonder and fear and hope, emotions everyone could understand regardless of their education or social status. When you sing about these events, you're not just reciting facts, you're participating in the story, making it real in your own voice, in your own moment. This is the power of narrative, combined with music. It bypasses intellectual analysis and speaks directly to something deeper in us. The Protestant Reformation brought new energy to carol singing. Martin Luther, among others, believed strongly that music should be accessible to all believers, not reserved for clergy. He wrote hymns and encouraged their use in services and at home. This theological shift had practical effects. If worship was supposed to be personal and direct, then families needed their own ways of expressing faith, and singing together became one of the primary methods. Carols became family traditions, passed down not through official church channels, but through the intimate act of parents teaching children, generation after generation. But carols nearly died out entirely in some places. In England, during the Puritan period of the 17th century, Christmas celebrations were actually banned. The Puritans saw them as papist superstition, as pagan holdovers, as excuses for drunkenness and disorder. For decades, singing Christmas carols was an act of defiance, something done privately, or not at all. When the monarchy was restored and Christmas celebrations gradually returned, carols came back with a kind of renewed vigor, as if the suppression had only strengthened people's attachment to them. This pattern has repeated throughout history. Traditions that are banned or suppressed often become more meaningful to those who practice them, precisely because they represent resistance, cultural identity, a refusal to let go of something that connects them to their past. The Victorian era transformed Christmas and Christmas carols in ways that still shape our modern celebration. This was the period when many of the carols we consider classics were either written or popularized. Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol played a significant role in this revival, reminding people that Christmas was supposed to be about generosity, family, warmth in the midst of winter's cold. The middle class was growing, and they wanted traditions that felt both respectable and emotionally satisfying. Carol singing fit perfectly. It was wholesome. It brought families together. It connected them to history and faith without requiring deep theological knowledge. Victorian composers and poets created new carols that emphasized these themes, beauty and nostalgia, and a kind of gentle sentimentality that appealed to the era's sensibilities. During this same period, the practice of caroling, going door to door, singing for neighbors, became formalized in new ways. In earlier centuries, caroling often had an element of social obligation to it. The poor would sing for the wealthy, expecting food or coins in return. There was an edge to it, a reminder that the celebration of abundance carried responsibilities to those with less. By the Victorian era, this had softened into something more genteel, but the core idea remained. Christmas was a time when communities were supposed to come together, when boundaries between households were made more permeable, when generosity was expected. Singing carols at someone's door was a way of saying, we are neighbors, we are community, we acknowledge our connection to one another. In an increasingly industrialized world, where traditional village structures were breaking down, these ritualized moments of connection became even more important. The 20th century brought recorded music, radio, television, all technologies that could have made communal singing obsolete. Why gather to sing when you can listen to professional performances of stunning quality? And yet, carol singing persisted. If anything, it became more valued precisely because it was one of the few times people still sang together. The act of singing a carol, even if you're off-key, even if you don't really remember all the verses, became a marker of participation in the season itself. You weren't just consuming Christmas, you were creating it, adding your voice to something larger. There's a psychological comfort in singing songs that millions of others are singing at the same time, in the same season. It creates a sense of synchronicity, of shared experience across vast distances. When you sing Silent Night in your living room, you know that in homes and churches across the world, others are singing those same words, that same melody. You are part of a global moment, connected to strangers through this simple act. In a world that often feels fragmented and isolating, this matters more than we might consciously realize. Different cultures have added their own carols, their own flavors to this tradition. Latin American villancicos bring rhythms and instrumentation that reflect their own musical heritage. African American spirituals and gospel traditions transformed carols into something that could express both joy and the complex history of a people. Each culture that adopts carol singing makes it their own, adds their voice to the tradition, proves that this is not a static museum piece, but a living practice that continues to evolve. The core remains, that impulse to sing together in the darkness, to mark this turning point in the year. But the expressions are endlessly varied. We sing Christmas carols because we always have, because humans have always sung in the darkness, because gathering our voices together creates something that individual voices cannot, because telling stories through music makes them feel true in a way that mere facts never could, because tradition connects us to those who came before and those who will come after. Because in the act of singing, we become part of something larger than ourselves, something that transcends the particular difficulties and anxieties of our individual lives. When you sing a carol, you're not just making sound, you're participating in a ritual that stretches back through centuries, that connects you to ancestors you'll never know and to strangers you'll never meet, all of us raising our voices together against the winter dark, insisting that light and warmth and community still matter, that we will survive this cold season and emerge into spring together. The carols endure because they address something fundamental in us, something that no amount of technological or social change has managed to erase. We need beauty, we need hope, we need each other, and we need ways of expressing these things that don't require eloquence or expertise, just willingness to open our mouths and join our voices with others. That's the secret of why we sing Christmas carols. Not because of their musical sophistication or their theological precision, but because in singing them, we remember what it means to be human, to be part of a community, to find light in darkness and warmth in the depths of winter. Thank you for joining us tonight on Bedtime Myths and Mysteries. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you'll hear echoes of carols in your mind, those melodies that have been sung for generations and will be sung for generations to come. Until next time, rest well, and may your dreams be filled with stories worth telling.